The Paul Leslie Interviews.
The long-awaited interview with Jim Morris. Jim Morris is the guest on today's show. We're very pleased and excited to have him on here. It's been a long time I've been wanting to have this interview, and now it's a reality. So welcome, Mr. Jim Morris, to the show.
Well, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. I'd have to say that out of all of the people that perform this kind of music, which I guess I always consider you like the king of tropical folk music, because it seems like you have the most devoted and largest fan base. Why do you think that is?
Oh, king, that's a nice title. I don't know. I'm sure it all comes down to the music in one form or the other. We do play a good bit all over the country. Maybe we have a little more exposure than most people, but I think it probably always comes back to the music.
And I guess I am a emigrated Georgia boy, and you are a Georgia boy who once was playing in the Georgia Sun. So how did you pick up this island-inflected music?
Yeah, that's a good question. I grew up. My mother's family was very musical, but they played like bluegrass and country and gospel and that sort of thing. And my grandfather had a dance band, a square dance band, and so everyone in my mother's family either sang or played an instrument. So I grew up around music, but it was certainly nothing like this. But I think that's a good thing too, because I had exposure to all sorts of music growing up. And I liked the Beatles when I was younger, and that kind of when I heard them, like a lot of people, I said, that's what I want to do for a living. And of course, back in those days, you didn't know how to make that happen. And I grew up in the late '60s, early '70s. It was a good time for music. So there's a lot of different type of music out there, and I guess when I heard people like Buffett and Michael Murphy and Jerry Jeff and Guy Clark, and a lot of those guys spent time down here in Key West, and that just sort of resonated with me. And shortly after I became a fan, I was able to live a lot of the places that these guys sang about. My job took me out to Montana and to New Orleans, and then I lived on St. Simon's Island, so that really kind of made the island connection for me. And I just started singing about all the things that I had done in those places, and it sort of evolved into kind of a tropical sound, I guess.
And what do you listen to now? You said you listened to the Beatles when you were younger. What kind of stuff can you expect to find in the CD player of Jim Morris? Well, it's a big mixture. I like singer-songwriter guys like Guy Clark and of course Jerry Jeff and Townes Van Zandt and Michael Murphy and Buffett. But I also like jazz. I listen to a lot of Michael Franks, the Crusaders, even instrumental stuff like Spyro Gyra, and a lot of, but I'd say mostly singer-songwriter types. I like the song to tell me something, and I'm kind of a lyric guy. And if the song's not saying much, I don't have a lot of patience with it. And one of the artists you cover a lot of is Jerry Jeff Walker, and there's good reasons for that. But how did you discover Jerry Jeff? I was in high school. It was the night of the state basketball finals, and I was listening to the radio, and they played Mr. Bojangles, Jerry Jeff doing Mr. Bojangles. This was like 1968, and that's the only time I've ever heard that on the radio. And I heard that song, and I loved the song. And then when they said the name Jerry Jeff Walker, I thought, what a strange name. And so I kind of tucked that away, and it was years later that I guess the Dirt Band came out with their version of Mr. Bojangles. And then I kind of I said, well, I'm going to learn that song. And so it kind of renewed my interest in Jerry Jeff. And I went to a lot of old record stores to try to find his old albums. And I did that a lot when I lived in New Orleans. They had a lot of old vintage record stores down there, and I would go in and try to find the old Jerry Jeffs that were out of print. And something about the Texas music is very articulate, very poetic. And it said, very lyrical, and it just kind of resonated with me. And so I've been a big fan of his since. And when I decided to do this for a living, I went out to Texas and kind of beat around out there for a while, just kind of following him around and studying what he did, and I kind of patterned my Fishhead music after what he does.
And the name of your record label and business is Fishhead Music, and you have one of the coolest addresses in the world. And I never thought I would mention this, but you live on 4060 Key Largo Lane in Punta Gorda, Florida. Doesn't Punta Gorda mean fat point?
It does, and if you look at the map, it's a big fat point. De Soto discovered that part of Florida, and he named it Fat Point, Punta Gorda. All the little places around Punta Gorda have names like that. Boca Grande, Fat Point. It's really kind of cool.
What brought you down to Punta Gorda?
Well, I guess when I decided to do this, I could live anywhere. And I thought that I might want to come to the Keys, so I came down to Key West and lived down here for a short while. And something about it just seemed like it had already been done, And I had spent a lot of time around the Punta Gorda area, and I really liked it there. I thought it was a combination of the Keys and the Big Bend area of Florida, which is old Florida. The thing I didn't like about the Big Bend area, and we spent a lot of time there when I was a child. We lived up there when I was a child in Florida, but it's too cold. I thought it was too cold up in North Florida. It's kind of weird to say that North Florida is too cold, but to me it is. And I thought that area was a very good compromise between that area of Florida and the Keys. The water looks a lot like the water down in the Keys. The fishing is phenomenal. They have great beaches, and the climate is very very nice all year round.
One of your songs seems to point in that direction, and it's called Back in the Sunshine Again. And I think everybody has thought that. I think that every year when I go to Florida. But tell me how you got inspired to write that song.
I was visiting a friend out in the Northwest. I spent a month out there with him, and he and I did a bunch of fishing in Oregon and all around the Northwest area. Steelhead fishing and salmon fishing, but it was very, very cold. And I remember one day being on a stream and I had to dip my fly rod into the stream to get the ice off the line guides. And I said, I just can't wait to get back to Florida, because it's pretty out here, but Florida's kind of where I belong. And when I started thinking about that, I started thinking about a lot of the things that I missed, and the song is kind of goes through went through my daily routine. Back in those days in Florida, I would go over to Boca Grande, ride my bike over there, and go to Whiddon's and have a few beers and talk to everybody, and talk to the old timers and the old fishermen and hear their stories. And so I just started reminiscing about that, and that's how the song came to be.
Every now and then you might be at a bar and you meet what I like to call a schmoodle friend. And there's one song about that, and I was wondering if it was autobiographical, about a young lady at the Conch House Lounge, and that song is called Thursday Afternoon at the Conch House Lounge. That's a mouthful. But I really love that song. So tell me about that song. Was that you?
Yeah, most of my songs are autobiographical. I do take some poetic license every now and then, just to make it rhyme sometimes. But that describes a day that I was on my way up to St. Simon's Island, and I was going to a reunion of my friends. We used to call ourselves the Fishhead Gang. The whole Fishhead thing came about when I lived on St. Simon's. I decided to make my own beer. And so a friend of mine and I started doing that, and we decided to call it Fishhead Beer. And someone asked me a long time ago if Fishhead were a ripoff of Parrot Head, and I said no, Fishhead existed long before Parrot Heads ever existed. It was kind of a ripoff of Moosehead Beer, if you remember that Canadian beer back in the old days. So we called it Fishhead Beer, and we used to make this beer, and it wasn't very good, but we had some great parties every time we came out with a batch. And so all of my friends that lived on the island during that time, we all moved away, and we kind of missed it. So once a year, we started having fish head reunions. And I was on my way back to a fish head reunion, and it's hard for me to go past St. Augustine without stopping at the Conch House Lounge. So I thought I would go there and spend a few hours, and then head on up to St. Simon's. And but that few hours turned in, like a lot of things, turned into an evening, then to a night, and then to early morning. And before you know it, I was waking up on the beach. So very memorable evening, and a good fodder for a song.
There's one of your songs that I always think is almost an oxymoron, and that's tropical depression, because you just don't think of that, but it's a reality.
Yeah, and that first came to be. I was up in Wilmington, Delaware. I'd moved up to Delaware, and didn't like it at all. And I was talking to my friends back on the island, and they asked me how I was doing. I said, well, I'm having a tropical depression because I need to get back down to the beach. And that's how the title came to be. And I worked on that song a little bit then, and then it was years later when Sharon and I went down to St. John's on our honeymoon. And we were down there for about 4 days where it rained continuously for 4 days because there was a tropical depression just off the island there. And it was raining so hard you couldn't talk. And so I took that opportunity to finish the song.
I think my favorite of all of your songs, the first time I heard it, I just felt it right away, and that was Live Until the Day I Die. And I just think it's a wonderful song. Tell me, was that song from a personal experience, or tell me about that song?
Yes, it was, and it's kind of a recurring theme in my music, sort of a seize the day, mentality. The idea to even drop out of the corporate world to do this came about when I think I read a line from Thoreau that said, don't die knowing that you never lived. And so I realized that, I had all these dreams all these years, things I wanted to do, and I had never done them. And I thought if I don't start now, I never will. And so that's when I decided to do the singing thing. And I was at a place called the Sandshaker Bar on Pensacola Beach. It was Easter weekend, and things got a little crazy, and I woke up in the aftermath of that evening and sort of started taking stock of my life, and that's when I wrote the song. I wrote that song on the way back from Pensacola Beach to where I live down in Placida, Florida, and the first verse is just sort of reflections back to your childhood, where you think of all the things you want to do, but sometimes all of that gets lost along the way. And the second verse refers to that evening on Pensacola Beach, where I kind of realized that maybe you've strayed a little too far. You need to get back to what you really wanted to do. But that's one of my favorite songs.
Well, this next song took shape, many years ago on an Easter Sunday morning after I had been overserved by an overzealous bartender at a little place on Pensacola Beach called the Sandshaker. It forced me to take stock of my life. I wrote a little song called Live Until the Day I Die.
There's one line in there that I was wondering about, and it's where the little boy looks and says, "What's wrong with that man?" Where did that come from?
We were trying to go to breakfast that Sunday morning, and it was Easter Sunday, and because we had kind of forgotten that, so we went to this. It was a Holiday Inn. They had a breakfast bar, and someone suggested we go there, and so we walked in, and it was crowded with all these families waiting for their Easter Sunday breakfast or brunch, and we went into the lobby because I'd slept on the floor that night in my clothes. I mean, we were looking pretty rugged, and it was a bad night. And I walked in, and there was this family standing there, and all of a sudden the children started huddling around their father, kind of going, getting behind him, like to be protected by him. And he sort of points at me, and I'm thinking, oh, this is really embarrassing. And so we left and went to a different spot. Yeah.
What's wrong with that man? There's another song I really like, and that's The Writer Guy. The Conch House Lounge song is about somebody that's getting some, and he's not.
Yeah. Yeah, the writer guy, I wrote that about my neighbor down in New Orleans, and I lived in a apartment complex there by the river, and it was kind of a quad situation, you know. And she lived next to me, and below her lived another guy a guy was just out of college, and he was working for the Times-Picayune newspaper down in New Orleans. He looked like Edgar Allan Poe, little skinny guy with real white skin and a lot of dark hair. And as soon as I saw him, I said, "That looks like Edgar Allan Poe." And she lived next to me and above him, and she entertained a lot, and she made a lot of noise. I remember the first time I ever heard her woke me up on a Friday night, and I thought I needed to call the police, and so that became sort of a regular thing, and he had a real crush on her, but this was a woman that it was totally out of his league, but he'd always talk about her, and so I kind of wrote the song for him from his perspective.
You mentioned a lot of interesting places. I mean, you live in Punta Gorda, and you mentioned New Orleans, and you lived in New Orleans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about some of the places you most appreciate here in the U.S. or anywhere, really.
It was really funny. When I was in the 8th grade, my science teacher gave us an assignment to pick out a spot in the United States that you would like to live and do a paper on it and then present it to the class. And I couldn't decide on where I wanted to live, so I wrote a part of it on the beach, part of it about New Orleans, and part of it about living in the Rocky Mountains. And shortly after I graduated from college, in a short period of several years, I had the opportunity to live both in the Rocky Mountains and the beach and in New Orleans, and so all that kind of came true. And I've always had a strong love for New Orleans ever since I was a kid, reading books about it. And I had the opportunity to work down there, and what almost killed me because I was trying to enjoy New Orleans and work at the same time, and that's kind of hard to do sometimes. But I love the town, and it's a great town to have lived in because you know a lot of the places to go without having to live there. So I enjoy that. I love the Keys. It's a very special place. Whenever I drive down to the Keys, I just stuff just starts flowing through my head. It's a great place for ideas. We spend a lot of time in Belize. We go to Ambergris Caye once or twice a year, and it's become a very, very special place to us. And we take a group of people down there every spring for a little fan club get together. But what we try to do is pick an island every year, my wife and I, to go and explore, and we kind of like them all. And now we're spending some time up in North Georgia, and I grew up in that area, and went up there a lot as a child, so that kind of brings back good memories too.
You were talking about your wife a second ago. So how did you meet her?
I met her at my corporate job. She was interning. She was an accounting intern at one of the plants I worked at back a long, long time ago. I've known her for about 20 years. And, we kind of dated off and on for a long, 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 long time. And I've only been married 7 years, so I stayed single for a long time. And she came down to Florida about 10 years ago. And we hooked back up, and then about 3 years after that, we got married.
When people see you on stage or when they listen to your music, they might have this vision of somebody that just, fishes all day and, just lives kind of a very laid-back life, which I'm sure you do. But you are very prolific with what you do. There's lots of albums, and you keep coming out with more. It doesn't appear like you're resting. I've noticed you play a tremendous number of shows. Do you think maybe that they don't have any idea how much work this is?
It is a lot of work, and I think that's one of the things that kind of separates us from a lot of other people, is that we really work hard at it. And but it's kind of a labor of love. I never sit around thinking, oh, damn, I've got to work today, or I've got to write a song, or I've got to do something related to the business, because it's just a tremendous amount of fun. And I'll never, hopefully never ever say that I don't enjoy what I'm doing, because I can't imagine doing anything else. But we spend a lot of time. My wife is a banker. She's the vice president of a bank, and an accountant and all that. So that helps from the business side. But she has a full-time job that she's very successful in. So she works full-time, and I do the music thing full-time. And then she lends a hand in my business, and we have another girl that works for us. So, but we do everything. From designing the T-shirts to writing the songs to making airline reservations, you name it, and we do it. But we're committed to doing it, well, and we put on a lot of our own events around Florida, and we spend a lot of time with that. And I think we're successful because we work hard at it.
I'm sure with all the places you've been and all the things you do as a musician and maybe in your leisure time, I'm sure you have some great stories. Tell me that one story. Maybe it's a band story, things that only happen on the road, or anything really, a story that you always like to tell.
Well, we have a saying in the music business that there's a 50-mile rule. Anything that happens 50 miles from home, you don't talk about. So that's the unspoken rule. But I can't. And you're right. There are a lot of memorable stories out there, and I'm sure I can't tell a lot of them without getting a lot of people in trouble. But we, I don't know, some of my favorite experiences occurred up in the bait shop in Toledo, Ohio, and I remember some of those, those great nights up there. But there's really nothing like being down here in Key West. That's probably, I know when I was thinking about doing this, the idea of playing down here was just, something I couldn't fathom, because I thought, I wasn't really good enough. And now to come back year after year and to be able to have the crowds and the impact here in the city is just it's just a tremendous pleasure for me. And so I think most of just being on stage like last night at Schooner Wharf, it's a sea of people out there and just watching all of the crazy things happening in the audience. I wish everybody had the opportunity to get up there and see some of that.
There's lots of people now that are doing this tropical kind of music, and we were talking about Sonny Jim earlier. Who do you think, when you think, wow, that's a great act?
Wow. I think everybody does what they do fairly well. I don't get a chance to see very many people. And if I had to think about who I've seen, of course, I've seen Sonny Jim several times. So we play on the same bill together, and I've seen some of the people that have opened up with us. We've seen Hugo opened up a few times, but we don't get a chance to really sit there and watch what they do. You see a few songs, and then you kind of move on. But to tell you the truth, I haven't seen a lot. You hear I always get the CDs and that kind of stuff. But I haven't really seen that many. That's kind of horrible to say, isn't it? That you don't get a chance. But I'm more familiar with Sonny's work than anyone else. And so I would think that he and I probably have a lot of similarities. We're both kind of lyric guys, and we can kind of share some of the same following.
Your website says that you're glibly reminiscent of Jerry Jeff Walker and Jimmy Buffett. I'm sure you get compared to Jimmy Buffett a lot, or at least sometimes, where people say, oh, he kind of writes that island kind of stuff that Jimmy Buffett does. But really, in some ways, yes, but in a lot of ways, your songs are very different. I would say they're even more of story songs than his. But what do you think about those comparisons?
I think it's almost natural that you have to compare any of us with Buffett, because he kind of created the whole genre. Yeah, the the one thing I find a little disappointing with him is that he hasn't developed it in any way. He could kind of be like Bob Marley is to reggae. He could be, the god of tropical music, but he hasn't really shown much interest in, developing other artists in that area. And I can't blame him for that either. But so it's almost kind of a no-brainer because we write about similar things. We live in Florida, and it's a shame that everybody gets painted with that same brush, though, because if you examine the music closely, there aren't as many similarities to Buffett as you think. And but I get it all the time. I get people around where I live call me the local Jimmy Buffett, and I say, well, no, he's sort of the national Jim Morris. And, but I think forever it's going to be tough to keep that from happening. I think anyone's always, because people that write are always looking for a reference, and I think that's their reference for this kind of music.
You're clearly someone that has followed a lot of your dreams. Do you have any dreams that you still are thinking, I should go for this?
I had one of my neighbors in New Orleans gave me a plaque a long time ago that said there's but one success, and that's to live life in your own way. And I guess I've always been that way ever since I was a child. And I didn't do all the things that your family expected you to do, like go to college, get married, and have a family, and all that kind of stuff. I kind of was very independent and did my own thing, and tried to live life as much as I could. And I just hope at the end, whenever it comes, that I'm satisfied with that. I always wanted to learn to fly, just like in the song. But I was having this conversation with some friends yesterday, thinking that right now with the way the way I do things, and my memory is, I'd be afraid that I'd forget a key ingredient and I'd crash. Because going out on a big boat or in a car or driving a big bus is you can always pull over to the side of the road if you forget to do something, but on a plane you can't. So I think I'd probably be dead by now if I tried to fly at this age. But that's something I always wanted to do, and I've never really spent any time in the South Pacific, and I intend to do that sometime real soon. But everything else, I've fished in some very exotic places, from South America to the Pontinal to Alaska and all over the place, and all over the Caribbean. And I've never been a real big Europe guy, although I did take a few trips to Greece because I always loved the history and stuff. So, but I'm fairly content.
That's a good feeling. Yeah. Have you ever thought about writing a book?
Yes, and I have people hounding me about that all the time. And when I decided to do this, I thought maybe what I would do is try to write a book and sing songs to supplement the book writing. And because ever since I was a child, I wanted to write a book. So I had all these ideas, and I started on it, and everything I came up with turned into a song. So, but I do want to do that, and we're going through a lot of changes right now at where I live. We had a lot of damage from the hurricane last year, so just a couple of days ago, our house was just put back together from last year's hurricane. We're in the process of building a new house that is about halfway done now. It'll be finished in the early spring, and they're beginning to work on my office and studio. Any day now. It's in the permitting process, and hopefully that'll be done by January. So I've told everybody that once all this is done and behind us and all these little projects are done, I'll have some space to work and everything, and then I think I'm going to seriously start working on a book.
When you're not performing music, what do you like to do in your spare time, if you have any?
Yeah, spare time is becoming less and less. When I started doing this, I thought I would be I would fish by day and play by night. It would be kind of like a part-time job, and it's turned into a very, very full-time job. But usually I like to spend some time on the water. We live at the Burnt Store Marina, so I have a couple boats there, and I like to get out fishing, and then go offshore a little bit, and sailing and that kind of stuff. And other than that, that kind of takes up most of my time. I live on a golf course, but I never play golf. And we travel a good bit, because I travel a good bit with my job, but we try to travel to places where we can just rest and relax and get away from things, and then I can sort of get inspired, to write stuff. And that's about it. And we've been going up to the North Georgia mountains recently. I think we're probably going to buy a place up there and another retreat to sort of get away from things.
What part of North Georgia?
Up in Blue Ridge.
Oh, yeah.
Lake Blue Ridge up there. About an hour and 15 minutes from Atlanta.
Out of all your songs, what do you think your favorite one is?
Yeah, I go back and forth on that. I really like It's Always Been That Way, and only because it's not that autobiographical, but I just thought it was well written, and when I wrote it, I was kind of proud of the song, and I like the way it. When in the studio, I had an idea of what I wanted the song like in my head, and sometimes it's very hard to make that translation from what's in your head to what really comes out. And there are a few songs, and that's one of them that came out the way I really wanted it to come out.
You have a really great band under you. I really like the steel drum player, Dave Lapio, or as we call him, the Papster. So tell me about your band. How did you meet these misfits?
Well, I started out as a solo act, and I never really had much interest in, or never really gave much thought to having a band. And after doing it for a few years, I met Dave Lapio at my wedding. I hired him to play at my wedding, and so he's out there playing steel drums. And I said, that would sound nice in my music. And I said, well, maybe I should give that some thought. And an opportunity came up for me to do someone asked if I had a band, and I said, no, I don't, but give me a couple of days and I'll try to put one together. So I called some friends of mine that I knew that played, and some of them hadn't played in a long, long time. And we just got together and rehearsed a little bit and did this gig, and we kind of liked it. And that was the genesis of the band idea. So I met Dave at my wedding, and he has been with me ever since then. The following year, we probably played 15 or 20 band gigs, and then from then on, it's grown to the point where I play about 50% of what I do is band, and 50% is solo. But the other guys, Gary Harvey joined us in I think 2001. I didn't have a lead guitar in my band for a long, long time, and I thought that'd be a nice addition because Chris Hadding, who plays on a lot of my CDs and who I recorded with for years, is an excellent guitar player, and I could never entice him to give up what he was doing in the studio to come out on the road and play. But his work sounded so good, so I ran into Gary one day at a country concert. We were there as a guest of a sound company, and they introduced us to Gary, and he had been playing with the Platters. And I asked him if he'd like to come and give it a try, and he did. And we've been together since 2001. And Jim Marks, the drummer, I think he came along around about the same time. And Jim owns a drum shop in North Fort Myers, and so he's been in the drumming business for a long, long time. Has a really good reputation, and I was happy to be able to get him to come along and play. And Dave Murphy, the keyboard player, he's only been with me about 2 years. We were doing a show in South Carolina, and he was playing with one of the other bands on the bill that night. And after they heard us play, he came over and said, "Hey, if you ever need a keyboard player, give me a call." And I had been thinking about doing that, and I liked the way he played. And so as soon as I got back home from the tour we were on, I gave him a call, and he joined us. And right now, Charles DeCosa is playing bass for us, and we've had kind of rotating bass players the last year or so, and I'm hopefully going to settle on one of those sometime very soon. Did I leave anybody out? I hope I didn't.
This program goes out all over the world, and there are people listening that maybe this is their first time listening to your music, and there's other people that I'm sure are extremely devoted fans tuning in. What would you like to say to the world?
About the world or about?
To the world, all the people listening.
Well, I wish everybody would treat each other better. For one thing, it's gotten to be that almost any act of just driving these days it's almost like a war zone. And I think maybe we should all slow down a little bit and try to enjoy life a little bit more. This year I've lost 2 people that I know. One was the treasurer of my fan club, and one was the wife of a good friend of mine, and they both died at a very early age. And unfortunately, it's at times like that when you realize that, well, we need to slow down and smell the roses and enjoy life more, and then you kind of get on with life and forget about that. But I think that you really need to find something that you have a passion for. And like I say in one of my songs, the money will come if you're doing what you love. And find a passion for it and enjoy it, because you never know when it's going to be gone.
Well, Jim, thank you so much. I appreciate this, and it's been a very interesting conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.